The power of Project Jake is realized when all of the components that I have described in these videos come together. The key goal of the project's model and framework is to help standardize the way that we talk about information collection and release policies. A subtle but critical feature of this approach is the ability to represent both actual and proposed policies and to compare their effects. Thus, this system is not simply a method for documenting existing policies, it's also a tool for comparing and exploring possible and proposed policies. Currently, when changes are needed in regulation or policy, those making the changes and those who are affected come together to discuss requirements and negotiate the changes that are to be made. Each party may anticipate the impact of changes and use their judgment to determine which changes have merit. This approach can lead to a zero-sum negotiation on specific points. As I outlined in other videos, the collection, specification, and distribution of registration information can be complex, and it can be difficult to fully anticipate the true impact that even a small change can make. We think that using Project Jake tools can make conversations of this type more productive. For example, over the last few years, there's been enormous attention to privacy issues. Of particular significance is the European General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR. The GDPR has forced complete revision of the control over information that's collected with a registration. This revision has been accompanied by cases of confusion. Let me give you an example. I was participating in a conversation about the ongoing policy development processes for GDPR. The question on the table was whether there should be a field that indicates if the registrant is human or a business, and if so, should that field be mandatory? There were strong views expressed in both directions. As I listened, I realized the differences were less in what they were trying to say, but more in terms of what they expected the consequences would be for each choice. One set was saying the field should exist, but it shouldn't be a requirement to collect it. Another set was concerned that by defining the field, it would impose a cost on everybody, particularly the registrars. From the perspective of Project Jake, these points of view are important, but conflate different parts of the model. The topic of defining a field and its meaning is separate from the question of whether or not who will use it, or if its use is required or not. The model prioritizes clear definitions for any field that may be used by more than one party, so that anyone who uses the field means the same thing. But the parties that are affected by field definition are dependent upon the choices made by the parties involved. Discussing both the definition of the field and whether it should be used makes the discussion more difficult. Using Project Jake as a tool in this discussion would make the conversation more productive by making the points of the discussion more precise. These kinds of things are positive progress that I think will clear away much wasted time. People are talking at cross purposes when underneath there isn't necessarily as sharp a difference as it might seem. Project Jake is also useful for quantitatively evaluating conditions that today are evaluated qualitatively. In addition, by describing policies and requests in terms of the Jake model, it's possible to conduct what-if analyses to better understand the impact of changes such as adding a data element or other changes. Such experimentation and analysis is not possible to do today. For example, law enforcement and intellectual property attorneys may complain that it is harder now to get information than it used to be, and use this perception as evidence that policy changes are materially interfering with their businesses. The Project Jake framework and model would make it possible to quantify this impact. In addition, it can help model solutions either in how policy is defined, information is collected, or requests are made, and compare approaches to determine which most effectively and efficiently addresses the needs. One of the things that I hope comes out of what we're doing is to bring to the surface those kinds of questions and begin the conversations. Hopefully the people in these communities will be willing to say more specifically what they need, why they need it, and how its lack is having a negative impact on their ability to get needed information. Naturally, these benefits can only be realized if folks see the promise of this approach and are willing to adopt a tool like Project Jake to support conversations and decisions. We seek your participation, input, and feedback as we move into the next phase of the project. I invite you to review more details about the project on our website.